Well, the time is just gone 8:38 a.m. as we continue with the Friday edition of News and Views this morning. And all eyes in the last few days has been in Beijing, in China, where President Donald Trump had met his Chinese counterpart. And it's been a much awaited, long awaited, much talked about meeting between China and the United States of America. And to unpack all of this for us, none other than the director for the Center of Africa China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. We are now going across to be joined by Professor David Monyae. Professor David Monyae, good morning to you, sir. Welcome to the show. An absolute pleasure having you as always.
Good morning, and good morning to listen.
I suppose, Prof, just to start off with this much long-awaited meeting between two of the most powerful leaders in the world, and I'm sure you've been watching and following development with a great deal of interest.
Oh, indeed. I think looking at the optics of it, this was indeed a very successful trip. The manner in which it was organized, the manner in which he arrived in the Beijing, received the honor, as well as the discussions. It showed that a lot of preparation were made to receive President Trump by China.
Well, you talk of optics, and obviously, one looks at it from a Chinese perspective as well. And I think what was most impressive is everything was just so meticulously planned. But looking at it from an American perspective, and obviously this trip comes from Donald Trump's perspective at a very difficult time where both internally and externally, America has been horribly exposed, particularly with regard to the attack on Iran and what is also taking place in America. But just in terms of optics and the enhancement as well, looking at America, looking at who had accompanied America, Donald Trump, to this trip, the CEOs of some of the largest corporations in the United States of America. And I'm just trying to wrap my mind and understand as to, what was some of the wisdom and the reasoning behind Donald Trump taking such a powerful delegation to China.
I think a better way to really fully understand is to take a step back. Let's go back to President Trump's first administration. In that stage, at the very first phase, I think he was the first American president that became so harsh on China in terms of declaring China as somehow an enemy to the status and hegemony leadership of the United States in the world. He also followed this with action in terms of restrictive measures that were taken in high tech, in a number of areas across the world, as well as really setting a very forcefully hegemonic posture globally. And second phase, we saw the continuity of that aggressive approach to China with the tariffs that he imposed. He went beyond the tariffs and issues of trade. Politically, I think we would see United States, whether it's in Ukraine, in Venezuela, and quite recent in Iran, even though China was not directly involved in these matters, there was a China dimension, there was a hidden China hand, tried to limit China power, as well as try to bring China to depend on the United States in terms of trade and forcing a continued use of the petrodollar. That was the main plan. Now, this trip has brought Donald Trump to Beijing with no cards, to use his own language. He had limited cards. He was timid. and begging China on a number of fronts. Um, on tariffs, I think we saw domestically he has been restricted by courts, that it is unconstitutional. When it comes to Venezuela, there isn't much of victory enforcing China to what he had intended. On Iran, I mean, one can't say he has won the war at all. As a matter of fact, he has unraveled that region, weakened the US power, and therefore coming to Beijing, begging President Xi Jinping to assist him to fix some of his problems, as well as begging President Xi Jinping to buy more, where we now have seen quite a bit of achievements, buy more American products, agricultural products mainly, planes, as well as he has also opened up the floodgate, the one that he had closed on chips that he had restricted for China. Now he's opening up with this huge contingent of business people.
Professor David, this turnabout on the part of Donald Trump, and we know, even before he even landed in Beijing as well, he made reference to President Xi as the king. And this comes after a time when he initially took office, and we know the tariff war that was taking place, and also Trump throughout this entire period since the time he's taken office until his visit now has come second best to China, and Trump has actually realized that this is something that he's not going to win. He has absolutely no leverage whatsoever over China, and came as a beggar, but also a beggar putting it in very nice terms, and singing the praises of the Chinese leader, singing the praises of China as well. And just, this strategy that Trump had actually used. And as you mentioned, he came begging to China. What does this actually mean for America and its standing in the global community?
In so many ways, I think President Xi Jinping captured it by saying that the world is undergoing changes that have never been seen in more than a century. I think, in simple terms, he meant China is rising. On the other hand, US somehow declining. I think that's the clear, sober way of looking at it. He, looking at President Trump, I think what we also witnessed was that the opening up and try to reassert and try to have a normal relationship, which somehow has been achieved. However, it's limited. The agreement itself, if you look at it, it's a 3-year, and it is tied to a number of conditions. I think that what the public is not talking about are those conditions. They include your Taiwan, they include a number of things that if you do this, we pull out. I think China has the buying power, so you can't really insult your customer. If you proceed with selling weapons to Taiwan worth $11 billion, as the case now, obviously we're not going to buy your planes, and we'll buy them bit by bit, and we will withdraw. And that in itself means that United States is becoming weaker. It is every action it is taking, it's just boomeranging on Washington. And the real truth, if you look, is that United States has been somehow weakened, not by China, but by its own action in China and in so many other areas.
Yes, Prof. And also, I think, we've all known that President Trump boasts to be what he calls a transactional president. So whatever he does is in the interest of the United States of America. But at the same time, this man is an egoist of the highest note. It's all about himself. We've seen in visits to the White House, how he's treated other heads of state, insulting them, but just looking at a very, very different, subdued, I would say, Donald Trump. Going, the begging bowl syndrome as well in front of President Xi as well in China as well. Obviously, the world has taken notice that, Donald Trump is not the man who he says he is.
No, indeed. I think we back on the issue of the optics. I think if you look at his body posture, it looked a man that is very weak. His head was somehow, it was bowing down to President Xi Jinping, and he didn't present himself as he does in White House. I think this is has to do with what kind of shock and awe in Beijing. I think what he noticed from the airport right to People's Hall and the troops marching. I think the Chinese played his game. They understood him well, and therefore the manner in which they received him behind the scene, I think there was that move of shocking the man to an extent that he did not know, he did not do what he normally does to so many other leaders. I think he showed respect. And it's also a lesson for President Trump that what he does, belittling, speaking down on other head of states. And China is a total different country. I think that message is quite clear. He promised that when President Xi Jinping comes to the United States, he will do the same. So it's wait and see. But I think you look at his own cabinet in the Great Hall, including the business people, they were really shocked. So they speak a lot about China, but I think being in China this time around, I think it surprised them.
Prof, I'm not too sure, and just staying a little bit with the optics is when Donald Trump landed in China and to be greeted by all these children. Now, many, in fact, some are actually interpreting this being greeted by school children as Trump's bombing of the school in Iran and the killing of 175 children. And I'm not too sure, whether one can actually read too much into this welcome by a whole host of school children. But, these are just some of the thoughts that are running through people's minds and trying to actually read, but also taking a look at it from a
Oh,
Chinese
I
perspective.
think uh, I think that was done deliberately. And it came as a surprise for him, and he kept on. He fell into the trap. He kept on talking about the kids, but the manner in which the pictures, I mean, did not look good for him. I mean, to be in front of kids at a time where the Epstein case involving kids, as well as the matter that you have mentioned. And I think the Chinese left it for his own domestic audience to analyze. And you and I now looking at the picture, analyzing them. So this is a psychological warfare that in diplomacy plays out. And he fell into it. It was done well, I think, well-meaning, demonstrating the human kind of, instead of insulting people. So I think they did it quite well to show him the other side of diplomacy, that power does not mean abusing it. I think it's a question of showing the human element, dynamics of power.
Prof, just on the subject of Iran and the discussion that Trump has had with Xi, Trump has made certain statements, but again, it appears as if he is putting the ball in Iran's court. And the statement, and I'd like to quote where he talks about, he says, we want them, Iran, to get it ended because it's a crazy thing there, a little bit crazy. It's no good. It can't happen. And he continues putting the responsibility on the part of Iran to actually end what is taking place in the Gulf at this point in time. The same sentiments were echoed by Marco Rubio, where he says they hope to convince China to play a more active role in getting Iran to walk away from what they're doing now and trying to do now in the Persian Gulf. But what we are not seeing is any serious intent or real intent on the part of the United States of America to end what is taking place against Iran and in the Persian Gulf region.
Our understanding of big power is that they don't negotiate their own power. They dictate. That's what hegemony is all about. You don't go to someone else to achieve your own strategic objective. In the past, it was the first Gulf War and so many other wars that the United States won using overwhelming power. There were no statements of this nature of begging, negotiation, or bringing other parts. It was dictated on the battlefield. That's what we know. And that's what he had intended to do. But the recent utterances, particularly by Mark Rubio, demonstrate the weakness and what we consider as limits of power that the US has been somehow, and Israel in this case on Iran, has been limited. They did not achieve what they had intended. They have more problems now than they had before, and trying to bring in China, trying to speak to other players and try to go back to multilateral on an issue that they thought they could resolve in a week. It shows weaknesses, and everyone is watching all over the world.
Yes. And also, I think just finally looking at it from a Chinese perspective and how does China actually take opportunity from this meeting with Donald Trump, where he actually featured second best, and also in terms of how China is now being seen across the entire world. We know what Canada has done as far as its relationship with China is concerned, and we've seen many other countries, and just in terms of China utilizing this opportunity to gain even a greater upper hand over the United States of America as a global superpower.
I think what Donald Trump has done is to hand over power to President Xi Jinping and China. In you calling for President Xi Jinping to intervene, as well as in Iran. So this has been done without China showing its hand, without China using force. And therefore, I think President Trump is quite aware that President Xi Jinping has influence as far as President Putin is concerned, as well as in the Middle East. And therefore, I think this is what President Xi Jinping was saying, that we don't need to fight among ourselves. We can, China can rise without disturbing the power of the United States. We can bring global stability. We can work together and ensure there's peace and security in the world.
Well, Prof, thank you very much for that. And as always, we do appreciate you taking time out for us right here on Salam Media. All the best to you. Have a great Friday and a great weekend ahead.
Thank you.
Professor David Monyae, Director for the Center of Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg, this morning with us and just unpacking some of the critical issues with regard to Donald Trump's visit to China. And once again, I think, for many of us who have been following the developments and following these meetings that have been taking place, the optics obviously have stood out for many of us from the time Donald Trump had actually landed in China to be greeted by school children waving flowers at him, but also a low-level delegation to meet Donald Trump on the tarmac when he had landed in Beijing, but also many other issues in terms of how Donald Trump is actually being seen by China. We've seen even mainstream media in China, when one looks at the headlines as well, Trump actually came out second best. In fact, the meeting with the leader of Tajikistan featured very, very prominently in some of the mainstream media in China as front page news. And Trump's arrival in China was basically a sidebar. So this is how Donald Trump has actually been meted as well, considering that Donald Trump. Acting with arrogance in terms of how he's actually been meeting people who have been coming across to meet him at the White House, insulting in many ways, arrogant as ever. As so, when you look at Trump, very, very humble, subdued, because certainly he has met his match. And I think this visit obviously is still going to tell us a lot more with regard to America and its standing in the international community. And with that, the time is just heading for 9 a.m. We're going to go for a break. We've got a lot more to come right here on the Friday edition of News and Views. So stay tuned. Don't go away.